Let's go ahead and turn our Bibles back to the book of Exodus, chapter number 18. The book of Exodus, chapter number 18, and we want to resume our study with Jethro and Moses. We're looking at the necessity of delegation. Delegation is admittedly one of those challenging issues to address. And it's challenging from, quite honestly, a number of perspectives. It's one of those issues that's very easy to point fingers in and say, yeah, so-and-so needs to really learn this. I wish so-and-so were hearing it. Truth is, as you hear much of what we're talking about, I'll guarantee that nearly every one of you will think, well, I sure wish that our pastor would instill some of this and that he would apply it. And trust me, I understand all of that and the challenges that are there. I also find that it's a rather sensitive issue sometimes, because sometimes things get delegated in a way that maybe they weren't delegated properly. Maybe they were delegated to someone who honestly was just not able to function really in that capacity or whatever. And so it put him into a very challenging situation to begin with. And so then they maybe grew a sense of resentment from it. Others may take a look at it and say, well, I'm willing to do, nobody asks me to do. And I'll be the first to tell you that there have been many times where I probably have not always handled things in a proper fashion. I say, well, I volunteered for something in 1945, and they didn't use me back then, and I'm still not being used. Well, at some point in time, we need to allow for growth. And I think we need to allow for growth. Say towards me, I'd like to think that in 3 years or 4 years, I've done better at some things. Perhaps in 3 to 4 years, I've done worse in some things. And those things are all possibilities. But we get our feelings in the way oftentimes when it comes to this area. And all of a sudden, we find ourselves hurt, often unnecessarily. People will say, well, why don't you, and speaking to me, why don't you delegate more? And I'm going to be honest with you. For me, it's not just an absolute unwillingness to relinquish that kind of power or control. That has absolutely nothing to do with it. Probably the greatest factor for me as I sit here and I think, you folks are already so busy. How can I add more? And that's been the topic of conversation with me and several individuals within this church who've said, well, you need to get so-and-so or whatever. And I think to myself, so-and-so is already working 50 or 60 hours a week. How do I add more? And so I don't. Okay? So guess what happens? Either I kill myself or it doesn't get done. Now, is it a matter of pride and authority that says, yeah, boy, look at me, look at everything I can do? Man, absolutely not. Wrong as it probably is, to be just completely honest with you, for me, it would be more of a situation of I'd rather kill myself than kill others. Okay? You may say, well, I can't believe someone would think that way. You probably think that way yourself, okay? When you take various things, it's just, and it's not that you're just desiring to do it, it's just, you just do it, okay? Well, I also find another challenge, and this has always been a challenge, and people will oftentimes say, well, I've been willing to do this for however long. If I don't know that, how do you delegate? You see what I'm saying? Maybe you've had a desire to teach a class for 6 years. Well, he just hasn't asked me. There needs to be a little bit of a flip side of that says maybe we should express that desire, okay? You might say, well, 8 years ago I volunteered to do this, and you said no. I ain't done anything since. 8 years, we've seen a lot come and go within this ministry. Hopefully, we've all grown to a certain level, and we've all reached a point where we're able to acknowledge there are certain things that we need to acknowledge, yes, we need to grow in. And I'm fine with that. You should be fine with that. and we press on, we do the work that God's called us to. In our particular situation, what I find is that we are in many ways extremely busy, probably too busy. And admittedly, I don't know how to balance it all. We have the tendency to look and see projects are done, therefore no one needed help with it. Well, it may very well be that one or two individuals killed themselves to make those projects done. We've also run into the issue of saying, okay, well, we're going to set this up at such and such a time or whatever, and then all of a sudden, those projects are now done, and somebody did not get an opportunity to serve. Those are challenging situations, and it's my point in it is all to say this: it's not necessarily as easy as just saying, "Here, go do this." And I wish that it were. If it were, then we would solve a lot of problems. Well, we're into Exodus chapter 18, and Jethro has brought Moses and his family now to him, and Jethro observes some things. He sees this long line of individuals, and Moses working from early in the morning until very late at night, and Jethro sees that as being a problem. And so we've already observed some of these things. Let me just pick it up very quickly with where we are. But in Exodus chapter 18, notice verse number 17. Moses' father-in-law said unto him, "The thing thou doest is not good." Led us into saying this regarding excessive work. Number one, excessive work is not good. Jethro looks at it and he says, you know what? You may seem as though we're doing a lot of good things, but his counsel is exactly right. This degree of work, Moses, is not good. Let's say it a little bit differently. It is detrimental. Its detriment is seen in a lot of ways. Number two, excessive work is wearing. Notice what he says. Thou wilt surely wear away, both thou and this people that is with thee. We talked about the problems that may come from someone standing in a long line simply waiting for their case to be heard. People aren't going to stand in line forever. Okay, it's going to create problems, but it's going to become very wearing. I don't know about you. I can deal with physical fatigue. I don't always like it, and those around me may not think I deal with it at all. But there's one thing with a physical fatigue: the more damaging and the more destructive one, and the challenging one, is the emotional or the mental fatigue. I don't know how to compensate that one when the brain just simply isn't functioning and it's just not there. A nap doesn't always solve that. A cup of coffee doesn't always solve that one, all right? The emotional fatigue, when you simply don't have it left in you, how do you handle those kinds of things? And Jethro recognized there's going to be problems with this. If you continue on with this, there are going to be problems. Excessive work is wearing. Then we saw number three, that excessive work is unbearable. This thing, he says in verse 18, is too heavy for thee. Thou art not able to perform it thyself alone. Moses, you can't handle that. Now, the thing that I like about Jethro, and what we did not get into, is Jethro did not just leave it at that. He offered a solution. It is very easy to come along and say to you, you are working too much. Okay. Thank you, Captain Obvious. You need to, as we use the illustration, we'll pick on Cecil again. Did you cut your grass this week by chance? No. What's the use, right? It reaches a certain point. You might as well just let it go to seed, and eventually it'll take care of itself. Okay? You need to cut your grass. Now, do you think that's something about which he's not already aware of? When he pulls into his yard, you close your eyes. Oh, wow, I didn't even realize it was growing. Okay, we lost the dogs in the grass. Well, what happened? Okay, my point in it is that oftentimes we're guilty of doing that. How do you solve that? And what we talked about, and much of what we said, those kinds of statements, when we come along and say, well, you know what, you shouldn't do this, or you should be doing this, those kinds of statements, and this was kind of a key point that we centered on, cost nothing for the person making them. It does me It doesn't cost me a thing to pull into his driveway and say, man, you need to cut your grass. Put the car back in reverse and go home. Did I say a fact? Yeah. Did I address a need? Yes. It cost me nothing to make that statement. But to the person who is receiving it, it is often very destructive. Because we're already aware of the fact. I don't need an obvious reminder. My grass is 3 feet tall. I understand I need to cut it. That's not the problem. The problem is cutting it. The problem is finding the time to make what is needed to be done actually happen. And so these kinds of statements are actually extremely detrimental because they take what feels like a rather hopeless situation in which there appears to be no way out. And we can take a look at it as something as simple, supposedly, as cutting grass and think, well, what's the, you realize it reaches a point where it's like, what's the use? What's the use in even trying? Now, to go and cut the grass, it's not a 5-minute project, not that it was to begin with, okay? It is such a longer project. What's the use? Have you ever felt that way in life? And then someone comes along and says, well, you need to cut your grass. You see the problem with those kinds of statements and where they go? Let me tell you what does cost is when we offer the solution. Say, I know you've not been able to do this. Would you mind if I would? Now, we learned last Sunday that they have 2 lawnmowers. Both parked right beside each other probably. Gas cans, everything is available. You see, now at that point in time, it becomes something that's going to cost me. Jethro's solution to this, he comes to Moses and Moses, what you're doing isn't good. And then he offers a solution. And that solution has this idea of delegation. Recently a while back, reading through a particular book, and there was a phrase that stuck out to me and along this line of delegation, only do what only you can do. Only do what only you can do. And the reality is that there are times where we've got to prioritize these things. We've got to begin to say, okay, well, I am given 24 hours in the course of a day, 7 days in the course of a week, 52 weeks in the course of a year. These are times that God has allotted me. In that is supposed to be sleep. In that is supposed to be other responsibilities and things that are carried out. There has to then become a prioritization of things. Only do what only you can do. And in many ways, this is along the same line that Jethro is going to advise Moses. He begins in verse number 20. Well, let's pick it up, verse 19. Hearken unto me, or hearken unto my voice, and I will give thee counsel, and God shall be with thee. Be thou for the people to Godward, that thou mayest bring the causes unto God. The first point that we see is this: delegation does not relinquish responsibility. Oftentimes we view delegation as something that removes the responsibility. Some approach delegation as the idea of, well, let me give you a task that I simply don't want to do. It's the nasty, the menial tasks, the dirty jobs, whatever it might be. And that person says, well, you know what? I don't have to do that because I'm in management. Therefore, I'm just going to make you do it. Here, you do this. Perhaps you've experienced that kind of response when maybe you are attempting to delegate various things, or maybe you've been the recipient of that level of delegation and stuff like that. And the reality is that what happens is sometimes people view it as nothing more than relinquishing the responsibility. When Jethro tells Moses, he says, Moses, here's what we need to understand. You need to be this individual who is going to stand between God and the people. You need to be the person that's going to bring the causes to God. Was Moses still responsible for what occurred? Absolutely he was. Okay? And he was responsible in a very key factor. Moses was ultimately the head, and Moses stood between the people and God, and it was Moses who was responsible to be sure that things were done in a proper fashion. Delegation does not relinquish responsibility. You can say, and people will say, well, you just take your hands off of it as though all of the responsibility from that is completely taken away. That's not it at all. As pastor of the church, I am ultimately accountable to God for everything that goes on within this ministry. Now, that's not a wonderfully pleasant thought at all times. There are many times where we think of it from the preaching standpoint and all of those things, but the reality is that I am accountable and I am responsible for all that goes on with that. Well, you're just hung up on your authority. No, that's not it at all. That's a fact, and you cannot remove that level of responsibility. We also have to point out that, number 2, delegation occurs after proper training. Notice what the Bible says in verse number 20. Thou shalt teach them ordinances and laws, and shalt show them the way wherein they must walk and the work that they must do. Probably one of our greatest hindrances and one of our greatest problems has been a lack of training. We could take and we can pull this out to all sorts of different levels. For example, we look for individuals who are willing to teach our young people. How many churches provide training to be able to teach? Some in our ministry have gone through school or have taught for years and are a teacher. That's one thing. Others of you aren't. You're willing, and for that we're thankful. And you do the best you can, and we're thankful for that. But isn't there a responsibility to train, to be able to teach to whatever standard is that is wanting to be held? In fact, I would dare say that it's wrong for us to hold a person to a standard that we've not been willing to bring them up to. Say, well, I expect so-and-so to do this, just like it's supposed to be done. Well, if they've never had the training, how do we expect that? Imagine what would have happened if Moses would have gone and said, okay, you know what? You guys just judge. Okay. Well, how are we going to make the judge? Just make the decision. It's right or wrong. So-and-so's stealing so-and-so's sheep. Okay? So-and-so's got an argument over a goat. Okay, well, the list goes on and on and on. Well, Moses had to instruct them in really 2 different ways. He had to instruct them, first of all, in the knowledge of things. You need to teach them laws and ordinances, is what the Bible says, verse number 20. They've got to know what the law is. It kind of seems rather logical. You can't expect someone to judge who doesn't know the law, right? Otherwise, they wouldn't have any kind of a standard. So there's going to have to be a knowledge and the imparting of the knowledge and that reality. But then it also goes on and it says there has to be a certain way in which they're going to live. And Moses, you're going to have to instruct them in that way as well. Moses, so you're going to need to teach them ordinances and laws, and then you're going to have to show them the way wherein they must walk and the work that they must do. You're going to have to show them what it is that they are to do and how they are to conduct themselves. So if this person is put into this position as a judge, does that mean that he only has to live his life with integrity from, let's say, 7 in the morning until 5 in the evening? Can he be dishonest after 5? Doesn't work that way, does it? You can't put a dishonest person in as a judge, in spite of what we in America seem to think, but that's a whole other issue in and of itself. You can't do this. And so there's a way that they're going to have, there's knowledge they're going to have to know, and there's a way that they're going to have to be able to function. Delegation occurs after proper training. And until we are willing to equip those individuals, we can't hold them to a standard that, quite honestly, sometimes is completely unfair to hold them to, because they were never brought to that level. We have applied this in many ways in our church situation. Well, let's take and put this out into other situations. You've heard the saying, if you give a man a fish, he eats for a day. Okay, you teach a man to fish and it takes care of him for life. How many times do we demand perfection sometimes from our children and we've never taught them how to do something right? Well, everybody knows how to vacuum. Remember when our girls were first learning the art of vacuuming? Vacuuming was a little different concept to them. Okay, they saw a Cheerio on the ground and they vacuumed that Cheerio up. Did they vacuum anything else? No, it wasn't dirty. Okay, so they just go on around the room. Teachers, you've probably had students clean your classroom. Okay, now, their idea of clean and your idea of clean were, generally speaking, two totally different things. I didn't work with the young kids. I was always in the older ones, but I know with teenagers, my idea of clean and their idea of clean, two totally different things. Now, if my idea of clean was the key for them to be able to get out of class an hour early, suddenly they were willing to learn. Okay? If my idea of clean was keeping them an hour after they were already supposed to be gone, they weren't so eager to learn. But there has to be instruction there. Whatever your field of expertise is, if you find yourself short with people and giving them the instruction that they need, you're going to be doing a lot of work. Okay? Sometimes some of us were perhaps brought up in homes where it was more of a tough guy kind of approach and a tough guy kind of mentality, and you learned things through the school of hard knocks. Okay? And that's, generally speaking, not the most effective way to teach somebody. And we perhaps could all go back and wish that we were able to redo certain things, but yet the reality is we've got to be able to bring someone up to that level of knowledge. And so, yes, we want to delegate, but before we reach that point of delegation, what I want you to understand is there's work involved in delegating. It doesn't just happen and say, okay, well, you know what? Fine, I'm going to delegate. Let me tell you everything that needs to be done. Here, you go do it. It doesn't work that way. There has to be direction. There has to be the training. There has to be the instruction that's there. And when we do not have that kind of direction, what we'll find is that oftentimes that's certainly is very problematic. We find number 3, delegation is to qualified individuals. Notice the Bible says, verse number 21, "Moreover, thou shalt provide out of all the people able men, such as fear God, men of truth, hating covetousness, and place such over them to be rulers of thousands and rulers of hundreds, rulers of 50s and rulers of 10s. The whole point of it is to come along and say, okay, well, you need to give this to qualified individuals. Now let me make a statement that may come across as very harsh. A willing person is not automatically a qualified person. That's a difficult concept. And in ministry, it's even more difficult. In the corporate world and in the secular world, they think absolutely nothing of saying, you know what, you're not fit to do this. You're not qualified to do this. This is not going to work. And you get fired. It happens all the time. I've learned with training at Young that not everyone is able to drive a motor coach. Okay? They can talk the talk. They can. And boy, they have talked the talk. Boy, they've got a resume, quote unquote, verbal anyway, that's as impressive as a day is long. Put them behind the wheel. And you know what happens? Well, we have these conversations with individuals and say, I'm sorry, we're going to terminate your training. Well, that's awfully harsh. Well, it's reality. Now, in the corporate world, it is what it is. Generally speaking, most CEOs are not losing sleep over firing an individual. Okay? Some don't even know that somebody was fired within their corporation, depending on how large it actually was. You know, ministry is a lot different than that. We try to balance things out, and we try to instill, and then we try to incorporate individuals in learning and growing and all of those things. And, you know, sometimes it gets to be a little bit more of a delicate balance. But we still have to say this, that a willing person is not automatically a qualified person. 2 of my daughters are now teenagers. One drives. Both are willing to drive. Okay? All 3 of them drive me crazy, but no. Both of them are willing to drive with my older 2. Only one of them is qualified. Okay? The other one will soon be qualified, so don't get too big of a head. You only one is qualified to actually do that. What does that mean? It is what it is. Remember my dad, when we moved into our house in Shelby from Illinois, and they hadn't quite finished the painting when we moved in. They were finishing up some of the trim work, and the painter, I don't even know why he had blue on the bottom of his paint can, because we had nothing in our house that was blue. But he had blue on the bottom of this can. Well, we had light tan carpet. And so everywhere that he would set his can down, there was this ring of blue paint. It didn't take long for my father's blood pressure to elevate, nor did it take long for that painter to be done. Dad looked at that and said, "You're not qualified to do this." Okay? Was he right? Yeah. Did that guy have a paintbrush in his hand? Yeah. Did he even have the outfit of a painter? Yeah. Did he have the brain behind it? It certainly seems questionable, okay? Was he willing to paint? Yeah. Was he willing to make a mess? Yes, okay. Sometimes a willing individual is not a qualified individual. New converts are willing to do many things. But do you realize that the Scripture warns against putting a novice in the position of a deacon? Not a novice, lest being lifted up. There's the danger of pride. He's simply not prepared for it. Now, the term novice does not just describe someone who is newly saved. It's fairly logical if we think, okay, well, yeah, that person just got saved 3 weeks ago. We're not going to put him in as a deacon. It also describes someone who could have been saved for a long period of time, but he never grew. He is also a novice. Even though he's been saved for years, his level of maturity is not such to put him in that position. It's not intended as being a harsh thing. It is in fact intended on keeping the sanctity of that office. Deacons, we find in the Word of God, have qualifications. Moses was to appoint, according to Jethro's instruction, verse number 21, able men. The word suggests they need to be competent. They need to be capable of doing this. Then they need to have an integrity that's going to also indicate they're qualified. They need to fear God. It's amazing how much justice is served by an individual who truly fears God, wants to do what's right. They need to be men of truth. You don't want a dishonest judge. They need to be hating covetousness, not guilty of it or condoning it. A judge who condones covetousness is an unqualified judge. He's not capable of functioning in the capacity that he needs to be functioning in. And place such, notice it's in italics, place these types of individuals over them to be rulers of hundreds, rulers of 50s, and rulers of 10s. There are individuals, and you're going to put them over these various groups. Some of them were capable of judging thousands. Others were capable of hundreds. Others were capable of 50s. Others were capable of 10. Does that mean that the person who is only capable of 10 is in some way inferior to the person capable of 1,000? No. But when you delegate, you've got to realize what are they capable of doing. And this is their role. This is their sphere. They may not be capable of going up and dealing with thousands. And you would suggest that as the numbers go, the cases are going to increase in their severity. So you got an argument over whose goat this is. Well, that's rather trivial. Okay? Probably the guy over 10 can handle that. Well, you got an issue over a property line. It might be a little bigger. Maybe we're up to a 50 now. Well, now you got an issue of a dispute between neighbors that's gotten hostile. Well, you might end up now to the hundreds. Now you got a murder. Yeah, you might be up to the 1,000. You see? Doesn't mean anything about those, and it could very well be that at some point in time you start with a 10 and then you work your way up. You prove yourself capable here and then you get 50. You prove yourself capable here, you get to 100. You prove yourself capable here and you get to 1,000. It may have been that kind of a system. But the point is, all right, here's your sphere of influence, so now function within this. Delegation number 4 is designed to create a system to maximize efficiency. So, he says in verse 22, let them judge the people at all seasons. And it shall be that every great matter they shall bring unto thee, but every small matter they shall judge. So shall it be easier for thyself, and they shall bear the burden with thee. Within this system, there are men who are appointed to be over thousands, over hundreds, and over 50s and 10s. Moses, you're going to hear the cases that we might describe are the major cases. Some had the ability to lead 1,000. Others had the ability to only lead 100. Some could do 50 and others could do 10. But here's a system that's going to create efficiency. And then we find number 5, delegation is the key to endurance. Verse 23, if thou shalt do this thing and God command thee so, then thou shalt be able to endure. What would be the implication if he didn't? You're not going to make it, Moses. It's not going to happen. But Moses, if you do this, you'll put this into principle. You divide the workload. The load is no longer carried by one individual. The sense of burden is no longer carried by one individual. I think that is as much of it as is the physical. The more that I have thought through and just with my own experience and so forth, the physical the long days, I'm sure, were tiring. But Moses was the only one bearing the emotional burden of all of these problems. You can't do that. That will destroy you sooner than anything, far sooner than the physical aspect of it. Moses, you need some people to help you bear the burden. And if you do this, then you're going to endure. Notice verse number 24. So Moses said, "Leave me alone, Jethro. I got this all to myself." Not what happened, is it? Verse 24, Moses hearkened to the voice of his father-in-law and did all that he said, and Moses listened. Moses didn't view the counsel as an insult to his intelligence. What do you think I am, Jethro? Dumb? He didn't view it as an insult to his ability. You saying I can't handle this, Jethro? Why don't you be a man and tell me what you really think? He didn't view it as an insult to his discernment. What are you saying, Jethro, that I'm incapable of judging these matters? He didn't do any of that. You know, oftentimes when someone offers a solution to things, we take it as an insult to our intelligence or an insult to our abilities. Who are you to question me? I know a whole lot more about this than you do. And it wasn't the purpose at all. Now, let me point out to you the manner in which those conversations take place. That oftentimes lends itself towards it as well. I could approach my daughters when they were learning how to vacuum. What are you, stupid? Everyone knows dirt's all over the floor. It doesn't accomplish anything. And sometimes the manner in which we do things, well, I'm just the kind of person who tells it like it is. Well, then you're the kind of person that hurts a lot of people. All right? And it's hard, especially if you are wired that way. It's hard to, and then what kills me is when I think I actually did well at not telling it like it is and I still hurt someone's feelings. It's like, man, I thought I was doing so well. I'd even patted myself on the back with how I handled that situation, only to find out that I didn't handle it as well as I thought it should. But if you're the kind that just tells it like it is, you're the kind that hurts a lot of people's feelings. And Jethro saw the wisdom, or Moses rather, saw the wisdom of what Jethro was instructing. He said, all right, we'll do this. And he instituted the plan. Verse number 25, Moses chose able men out of all Israel and made them heads over the people, rulers of thousands, rulers of hundreds, rulers of fifties, and rulers of tens. Do you think Moses did this in one night? Okay? We've sat there and we've discussed things and said, okay, well, we need to delegate those things. Okay, well, that still takes work to get to that point, to create your system. And they judged the people in all seasons. The hard causes they brought unto Moses, but every small matter they judged themselves. And Moses let his father-in-law depart, and he went his way into his own land. Tremendous instruction, tremendous counsel that is able to be given for us here. And he saw the wisdom behind it, and what you find is a much greater efficiency and a much greater level of stability. And there is a lot of work that's able to be done when many hands are involved in doing the work. There is no doubt about that. In our ministry, it's an area we need to grow in. It's an area I need to grow in. I'm going to take and flip it and say it's an area you need to grow in as well. I think we are all in this thing together, and what we need to recognize is that I am not perfect. I know that's a shock to most, if not all of you. So now that I got your minds back after a shocking statement that I'm not perfect, here's the reality. There are times when I probably haven't delegated something wisely. There are times when maybe I have hindered someone's willingness to serve. Let's move beyond those things. Let's also realize that I can't read your mind. All right? It's a fair thing. Sometimes I read your minds quite well. When your eyes are closed and your head's down in your lap, I can read your mind real well. There's not a lot going on up there, dreaming away. But I can't read the minds. It's unfair to hold that standard to me to say, well, you should know that so-and-so's been wanting to do this for 3 years. Okay. How was I supposed to know that? And honestly, for me here within this ministry, rather than saying, oh man, he just doesn't want to delegate anything, understand that my perspective, 99% of the time, I can honestly say, as I sit in my office and I think they are so busy already, how can I ask them to do another thing? Right or wrong, you can throw stones at it if you want, but that's generally where it is. And I say, man, I can't ask them to do one more thing. We do a lot, and this ministry is what it is because of people's willingness to step in and volunteer, find out maybe who does certain things and see maybe they need help doing them. We are thankful that the facilities are cleaned. We're thankful that the grass is cut. Who does it from week to week to week to week? I say, well, they must have time, or not necessarily. They may simply be just trying to get it done because it needs to be done. And they may welcome some help in certain things. Now, if someone comes to you and says, well, you know what, I really want to help you clean. Can I help you clean? Yeah, go get the toilet brush. You see? I really want to help you cut grass, so let's think of the worst and nastiest and most miserable process, and I'll take care of the rest. It doesn't work that way. Okay? You grab the scissors and cut the ditch. Okay? That'll help. I'll ride the lawnmower with my glass of sweet tea. That isn't right. Okay? And we have to allow and say, well, you know what? Okay, let me back off and I'll let you serve in this capacity. And sometimes that is as much of a challenge for you to accept as it is for me to delegate and administer. And it is a delicate balance that we have to strive to maintain. Let's pray and we'll be dismissed. Lord, thank you for this time. Thank you so much for your word and the truth.